hours after His Majesty the King have give all the indication, orientation to first take care of the victims, their safety and their relief. Maybe just 2 or 3 maybe information or data to say how the sequence were disciplined was very efficient and close to the priorities of the victim and the population. Less than a week after, students were back to schools. In, of course, conditions that are not the best conditions, but they were at school. 1 week, 6 days after the earthquake, we were in a position to give the population information of how we were taking care of their housing. Some money transfer for the first year and the direct money transfer to rehabilitate and rebuild their houses. It brings relief. It's important. And we're so proud that last Friday, less than a month after the earthquake, the effective cash transfer was done. But beyond this, there was this visible damages, but there was also invisible, I would say, damages because of disparities of this region of the mountain. So the most important thing was that we have a very comprehensive, strategic, ambitious plan for 5 years to build back better, to build back forward better for this population.
Thank you very much, Minister فتاح. What you're saying is that the essence of what you're saying is that His Majesty's government is laser focused on repairing the visible damages, but also the invisible damages, the ones that we have in the social area. Let me turn to you, Managing Director Georgieva. Mahatma Gandhi once said, the future depends on what we do in the present, right now. So during your amazing career, going from environmental sustainability at the World Bank to now steering the IMF, you've always been about proactive action and how we can change the present to secure a better future. So given the current geopolitical, I would say, turmoil and the rapid transformations that we see in the industry, the fact that the fourth industrial revolution is destroying blue-collar, white-collar jobs, and that some countries are under tremendous pressure, how do you see the role of the IMF evolving? How do you see yourself and your institution bolster countries in navigating these complex situations?
Let me first express my admiration for the incredible solidarity of the Moroccan people in the face of the earthquake on September 8th. I had the chance to visit with the minister an affected area and be with kids in a school that is in a temporary building, another part of it in tents, but the kids are in learning. And they met us with big smiles on their faces. Learning is what gives an answer to your question, building the human capital for tomorrow. What does it mean for us at the IMF? First, we recognize that when the world changes, we must change as well. We have seen the IMF moving from an institution operating in a gold standard world to one that is supporting the transition to flexible rates. We saw my part of the world, Eastern Europe, former Soviet Union, joining en masse the IMF in the early 1990s. And the IMF helping us in a very painful structural transformation from centrally planned to market economy. What is in front of us today? Rapid change, technological transformation is moving so quickly that no more policymakers can take their time, debate and discuss, and then come up with policy prescription that would last for years, sometimes decades. This time is gone. What it means is that for us at the IMF, we have to be much more agile and adaptable and help our membership to do so. Second, we are in a more shock-prone world. The last couple of years taught us, think of the unthinkable, because it will happen. And then we have to have the institutional strength to help our members build resilience to these shocks and have the operational capacity to very rapidly step up when the shocks occur. I'm grateful to Christine. Christine built a strong institution for this time of shocks. And I'm very grateful to my staff, to the wonderful people of the IMF. Some of them are sitting here in this audience.
I'm sure we can give them a round of applause because they
deserve
a tremendous job.
They deserve it. They deserve it for the speed and scale of action. 1 week after WHO announced a pandemic, we made our first emergency finance disbursement to Kyrgyzstan, with many more to follow with the speed of light. So having emergency capacity, the ability to inject massively reserves and liquidity is what we have to do. But three, help countries prepare the skills for tomorrow. Have education in a way that helps people to learn. We were fortunate because all we had to do was learn. Learn languages, learn math. Now our kids, they have to be able to absorb what we cannot even imagine possible. And I want to finish, you started with Mahatma Gandhi, I'll finish with somebody who followed in his footsteps, Mandela. What did Mandela say? Impossible until it is done. We are in this world of impossible that demands from us to do what we cannot even imagine in this room today. We can.
Thank you very much, Managing Director. Building up on what the Managing Director has just said, I turn to you, Christine Lagarde. Kristalina Georgieva highlighted the issue of speed, of knowledge. And I guess that I like to do cinematographic references, but like Sandra Bullock, crisis is your brand. And you've been through all of these crises in the last decade. How do you see, with those two parameters that the Managing Director gave, which are speed and knowledge, how do you see the role of the ECB as being this buffer when those huge crises arrive and when these cyclones are hitting and those black swans are coming?
Well, thank you so much, and I'll come to the ECB in a second. But, you know, as I'm looking around this room and I'm seeing all of you very attentive, I think to myself, we have to be grateful to the two ladies who just spoke. One, of course, is representing the government of Morocco under the leadership of His Majesty, which has actually managed for us to be sitting around in this comfortable setting, listening to very smart ladies and gentlemen as well. I'll come to you in a second. So that's number one. But number two, if it hadn't been for this very courageous lady who just spoke, my colleague and friend Kristalina Georgieva, we would not be here. Because Kristalina will remember that about 3 weeks ago, so very shortly after the horrible September 8th, there was a lot of doubt. And there were lots of people who were saying, well, you know what, let's just stay away. It might be a bit dangerous. We might be running some, you know, sort of reputational risk. And no, we are all here and you are all in this room thanks to them. Yeah, we owe you a great deal, and the pleasure that we will enjoy in the next few days is largely attributable to these two ladies and the persons who work around them, and of course His Majesty the King. Now, back to your question. I just want to flag three major developments which have to do with your points of knowledge and speed, which in my view and in the view of the ECB will transform the environment in which we operate. And the first one has to do with technological revolution. You all have heard about artificial intelligence. Many of you have heard about generative artificial intelligence. And some of you are probably experimenting with Gen AI, as it's now called. And I think that there is at the moment this big question out there as to whether it is going to eliminate jobs, put people in redundancy situation because they will not be equipped and their functions will have been replaced, or whether it is not going to equip many of us, hopefully all of us, with additional tools and the ability to actually upgrade the contribution that we make to the economy. So that's big challenge number one. Generative artificial intelligence is going to impact all of us. I can tell you that at the ECB, for instance, we are embracing artificial intelligence and we are trying to improve our game, improve the quality of the human work that is put into our analysis and the output that we provide to the membership and beyond. The second thing, which obviously is a major challenge, and we are seeing it out there. The first thing that you see when you arrive here are those dry trees. As we were discussing earlier on, it's not random, it's not 1 year in many, it's just that climate change is upon us and requires that we all adapt, adjust, and that we move fast, as Morocco is doing. And the third element, which is also a major challenge because it impacts the previous one, is this inability of policymakers to actually cooperate, work cooperatively to actually find international and global solutions to what are international and global problems. Those are the three big challenges that we are facing, among others, but I would pick those ones. And to give you an example of what the ECB can do, like any central banks, but I can only speak for my own, number one, we have to procure price stability, because if you don't have price stability, nobody is going to invest. And in particular, when it comes to climate change, you want to make investment that will provide a return in the long run, and you need to know where prices will be. Second thing, all international institutions can embrace climate change and the fight against climate change and to protect biodiversity in their day-to-day life. That's what we do at the ECB. We tilt our corporate purchases programs and reinvestment to take account of that. We make sure that the collaterals that we get in order to provide funding are actually integrating the externalities that have to do with climate change. And third, we can also be a participant in offering not a forum like the IMF does very well, but at least a place where there is a little bit of certainty in this universe of complete uncertainty. So that's very quickly, in a nutshell, what we can do.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Lagarde. And this has been actually very helpful because you give me the ideal transition to turn to your neighbor. Because basically what you're saying, when it comes to taking immediate actions when markets are going crazy, there is no love, there is just proof of love. So we need to take action and to act very fast. So, Michael, I turn to you and turn to your expertise in this domain. You know, Warren Buffett used to say, it's only when the tide goes out that we know who's been swimming naked. And everybody's like, okay, this is an unprecedented level of crisis. We've never seen that much crisis, but you've seen a lot of crises during the 3 or 4 last decades, and you understand the great shocks, the strength, the strategy. Are we looking at the world with biased eyes, with binacles that doesn't work, or did something really change in the nature, the speed, and the might of the crisis that we see in financial markets?
Thank you. I would like to start by expressing my gratitude, our gratitude, collective gratitude to the 3 ladies who are on our right, on my right. it is because of them and people like them and women like them that the world is a better place, and we will continue to make it a better place. On your question, I would like to give the audience a little bit of historical perspective, maybe not 40 years, but 30. And beyond that, I think we have a tendency in today's world to forget history or ignore it, and as a result, as we all know the famous quote, we condemn to repeat it. And what I'd like to say is that financial crises are nothing new. And it's important to go back to the past and to learn from past experiences. I remember, you probably all do, October 2008. This is the beginning of the great financial crisis. Lehman Brothers had gone bankrupt a few weeks earlier. Markets had been closed, which was unprecedented. I think the prior time was 9/11. And the world was sinking fast, fast, fast. I was at Harvard for my 25th reunion, and I decided to attend a panel which was run by Professor Merton. He's a Nobel Prize economist, very well known for his work on option theories. And he said something simple and so powerful, I still remember it. Crises are bound to happen. They are in the nature of capitalism. They will happen again and again and again. And if you hear any smart young money manager who tells you he found an asset class which is uncorrelated, meaning will not move up or down with the rest of the market, just run. And he was so right. He put things in perspective for me and for many other people. The illusion of the prior 20 years of steady economic growth were shattered in just a few weeks. This is not something I hadn't seen before. I started on Wall Street in late 1986, so I've had my first crash in October 1987. It was Monday, 19 October 87. I still remember this. I'm a young associate at Morgan Stanley. I decided to go down on the trading floor, and I see the world collapsing. 20%, 22%. The drop was absolutely phenomenal. Incidentally, this will be the only reference I will make to M&A, mergers and acquisition. I went back together with my colleagues up to our phones, and we started calling the companies saying, we know you're interested in this target. You were looking at it at $38. How do you like it now? $30. No one took. I learned then and there that M&A volume drop with the equity market is probably the wrong thing to do for most buyers, but there you go. Anyway, back to Professor Merton and the lecture. What he said was essentially in line with what many academic and well-known economists said over time. There is, I will make perhaps a couple of quotes, or give a couple of quotes. Minsky did a great piece of work in 1986 on the cyclical nature of financial market. And he said, he expressed a tendency, he highlighted the tendency for stability to breed instability. When there's gradual accumulation of risks, because people are comfortable, investors, lenders, borrowers, then you take on more risk, until there's a crisis. And this was not the first time. John Kenneth Galbraith earlier did a great piece of work on the crash of 1929. And he wrote something which is very, very important. The financial memory is very short. This is the invariable lesson of financial crisis. It's a simple argument, we just forget. And we are, I would support the thesis that we are in a classic, although heightened, manifestation of cycles right now. We love to find out new explanations for things. We love to trash the old. We like to find new paradigm. I hear something called perma-crisis. There's a book about it. There are articles all the time about it, etc. This is not true. Why can't we just accept that we've had extended periods of stability, and also we've had prolonged states of crisis before? I know it feels worse because some of the things you mentioned earlier, accumulating, but I just want to give you one example. In 1929, when the market collapsed by about 23%, do you know how long it took for the index to go back to where it was before the before the crash? 25 years. In the great financial crisis, which we'll remember, 2008, how long did it take? 5 years. After the pandemic and the crisis...
I see that Mrs. Lagarde... Do you want to react to that, Mrs.
sorry.
Lagarde? Do you want to say something?
I think
Too
that
long or
they
too
are-
short?
no,
5
no,
years?
5 years, I think, is in some parts of the world. Other parts of the world took a little longer.
You are
Right.
entirely right. Certainly not. We haven't got back to that level in Europe. I was referring to the U.S. market. You're absolutely right. Thank you for the correction. Back to the pandemic, and again sticking to the U.S. Massive crisis, 9 months. It took 9 months to go back. Okay. So my point is, there is reason for tempered optimism here. Things, when you look at history, things have been worse. And by the way, I'm only talking about financial markets. What happened after 29? A world war. 50 million people dead. Of course, I know we have lots of issues on the planet right now, but there's been a lot worse.
This is amazing, ladies and gentlemen, when you see an M&A legend turning to the world of thinkers and going and quoting Galbraith and coming back to economic theory. But let me turn to you and react to what Michael just said, Tidjane, because basically what he's saying is that, well, if you look at the world, crises are shortened now. It takes less time to resolve a crisis. Of course, there's a lot of fuss because we have social media and we have a lot of people that are talking about the crises and everything. But you, Mr. Thiam, given your own journey, you faced many crises and navigated significant shocks. You were CFO of Prudential at a time where the financial crisis hit the world. You were CEO of Credit Suisse in very challenging times. But now you're steering Freedom Acquisition Corporation. All of the speakers who spoke before you spoke about cycles. They spoke about speed, adaptation. In your view and your expert opinion, how do you view the landscape of global economic challenges, particularly in the light of the great systemic shocks the world is bracing for right now?
Thank you. Thank you, Abdelmalek, and hello, everybody. Before addressing the question, I'd just like to devote a few seconds and have a word for Morocco, which is a country close to my heart. And I just want to say that the recent tragic events have once again proven to the world the strength of Morocco, the strength of its society and its leadership, and it's just something it cannot be overstressed. And I'd like to salute here the Minister and also Kristalina and all those who have helped Morocco go through this difficult time. Only those who don't know Morocco have been surprised, and we can come back to that later. Now, to go to the issue, we all know the challenges, the shock, the external shocks, COVID, the heavy intervention of governments, the inflation that followed, the pressures on purchasing power, more recently Ukraine, geopolitical issues. So that's the background. But I tend to be in agreement with Michael, and maybe that's why you sat us to this end of the panel, because I'm an optimist, incurable optimist, because I believe in the human spirit, and that will be my first comment. I'm looking at Kristalina here, but I was one of the African Union COVID envoys. It was a very dark time, and I'd like to commend you, Kristalina, for the quality of your leadership, your determination, your drive in addressing that very early on. I remember the discussions on the SDRs, etc. So really, thank you from all of us for that. And when I see that we now have mRNA vaccine manufacturing capacity in Africa, kind of 18 months later in Ben Siman in Morocco, that is absolutely revolutionary. And I'll just make an aside here, but I can say with high confidence that the malaria vaccine is not far. Think about the transformational impact this is going to have on Africa. It's really not far. Any scientist will tell you we have about a 70% probability of finding it in the next 2 years. That's, game changer. So the power of the human spirit, our ability to innovate, to find solutions to problems is infinite. It has to be combined with equality of opportunity. And I'm going to embarrass my women co-panelists here, but 30, 40 years ago, I don't think anybody would have expected that on a panel, the former head of the IMF and current head of the ECB, the current Minister of Finance of Morocco, and the current head of the IMF would all be women. So I'd like to salute you. I think that's...
Tidjane, are you saying that we're outnumbered in this panel?
Well, you compose the panel, so I leave you the responsibility of that statement. But it's, for me, I live in a better world. I'm happy to live in 2023 because of that. If I, not to get all romantic, but my father used to tell me how he was arrested in Côte d'Ivoire when he arrived because he didn't step down from the curb to let a European pass. So, you know, the world is definitely a better place in 2023 than 50 or 60 years ago. And the final comment I'd just like to make, but it comes out of the first two, is really innovation. I just looked, if you take the 10 largest companies in the world by market cap, 2 observations, 8 are American. You can pause and reflect on that. And 5 are less than 40 years old, 40. That's the first time in the history of the world that 5 of the 10 largest companies are less than 40 years old. And it's going to get worse or better. You know, it's only going to accelerate. It's only going to go faster. But for me, it's a coin with 2 faces. One can get pessimistic about it.
Just so the audience can understand, what's worrying you about this? Is it too much concentration?
It doesn't worry me. I actually think it's good news. Because what it underlines is that this competition is intellectual. And that is the level where developing countries are least at a disadvantage. Because I believe that skill is uniformly spread among all children who are born on this planet. What's lacking is opportunity. Okay, we talked about education and health, but a competition which is based on intellectual creativity, I welcome. Because that is something that we actually have in spades. You know, you can look at art, you can look at every form of creativity that Africa is able to express, whether it's music. There's no shortage of creativity, there's shortage of opportunity. So I think in that world, on that stage, we'll be able to compete. And I look at the next 30, 40 years with optimism.
Thank you very much. So, Nadiya, فتاح, let me come back to you. President Thiam said that he's an optimist. Sometimes an optimist is just a pessimist that didn't look at the forecast right. But you're an accomplished jogger, so you know the challenge of keeping pace, balance, tempo, being able to go for the long run. Let's take this conversation closer to our heart and bring it to Morocco a little bit and talk about the region. As an accomplished jogger and someone who understands a lot about rhythm and how to manage your effort, how do you see Morocco facing the question of stability in motion? How can we at the same time do the tough, the urgent reforms and find budget for that, and at the same time do the structural transformation when it comes to education, to ecological transformation? Do you have a tree that grows magic money? That's the question. How do you solve this economic trilemma for a country like Morocco?
First, I hope that my performance in my job is better than my performance in jogging, otherwise it will be scary. Before answering directly your question, 3 weeks ago, just after the earthquake, one financial partner, neither of IMF and World Bank, told me, look, we'll be ready the moment you would like to restart. And I said, we're not restarting. So surprised. We're not restarting because we are not stopping. We cannot afford it. I thought 2 years ago that the worst case scenario was there. And when I was discussing in Article 4 with the team of IMF, what's planning next, I said, we're done. But unfortunately, and I agree, crises are there. And this is why in the first communique of His Majesty the King, it was about safety, assistance to people, and also a message, don't stop. We cannot afford it. We have so many challenges. On the other hand, I would like to say that we're blessed in Morocco because we have a long-term vision. It's important because we are not changing priorities. And you know, all of you, that you need time to implement, to execute. So you cannot afford to stop. And this is why our priorities are clear and not changing. The social state, education, healthy, safety nets. This is very important, but also allowing for economic growth. This is very important. And because we are having this disciplined, very committed and dedicated strategies, I think we have built the confidence, the political, the social confidence that allow for this dynamic. And this is why we are now moving to another pace of reform that is very important. Maybe one example, we were discussing it with my fellow colleagues before the panelists, water, scarcity of water. We are no more in the mindset of saying what we do a year when we have a drought. We need to have a comprehensive, permanent plan for water scarcity. This is why within 5 years, all the drinkable water will be coming from alternative. And we will no more have to decide, shall we give water to drink or to the farmers for agriculture? We need both, and this is why we are having this solution. You're looking at me, I just want to say one thing. I'm happy that we are having this conversation with very talented ladies and men from the financial world. When you have strong and reliable portfolio of projects, you find the money and you find the solutions and you find the partners. And I want to convey this message and thank the strong partnership with the institution that helps Morocco in this dynamic.
Thank you very much, Minister. Actually, to be frank, I feel a little bit left out because I'm the only person who didn't thank you, Managing Director Kristalina. So thank you for everything, and thank you for having me as a moderator. Let me just maybe ask you one question before we bring this conversation closer to home and to Morocco. Are you wearing a Moroccan jacket? So thank you very much. Can you please just... So you fulfilled completely your role as a citizen of honor of Morocco in this day in honor of this plenary session. But let me bring this close to our hearts. We know Morocco has a very close and strong relationship with the IMF. How do you see Morocco evolving in this region? How do you see our trajectory, our role? Minister فتاح said, basically, we have a king with a vision, we're a country with a plan, and we're laser focused on execution. How do you see us from DC, from your institution, and how do you want to move forward with Morocco?
Well, since we talk about fashion, the most fashionable thing I had on my back was the Atlas Lions jersey on Sunday. I can tell you that what you see on the soccer field, the men and the women of Morocco playing, is a symbol of the dynamism, the unstoppable energy of this country. I also should tell you, I scored. I'm proud of it. What we have just presented a book on Moroccan experience in this quest for growth. Very appropriate to look into the potential for the country to grow because global growth is slow and it would remain so. We simply don't have the growth we need to recover from the shocks everywhere and to build prosperity for the future. So what is the recipe that works here and would work even more? One, strong fundamentals. It is like building houses so earthquake cannot tear them down. Morocco has done it, but it doesn't stop, as the minister said. The world is changing, Morocco is changing. We have seen inflation in Morocco dropping from 13% to 5%. Still a little bit to go, but that is what strong fundamentals deliver. When a shock hits, you're more resilient. Two, Morocco recognizes the importance of diversifying the economy For tomorrow, I had an interesting conversation. As you know, Morocco is a tremendously important source of renewable energy. And I was asking our partners in the government how they see the future. And what they're saying is they want Morocco to be on the cutting edge of the green economy. We heard from the minister in terms of what is being done on water, because not only it is necessary for the survival of people and businesses, but it is also a competitive edge. And constantly seeking this competitive edge, clearing obstacles for private investments to flourish, is the second part of this recipe for success. And the third part, I cannot praise enough, is building solidarity in the Moroccan society, striving for more equitable growth, for more fairness in society. In a world of more frequent shocks, we need each other. We need to trust each other. And for that reason, I very much support the attention to social safety nets, to education, to giving equal opportunities to everyone. Big message for our meetings. Big message. We cannot solve problems one country at a time. We can only succeed in a world of more frequent shocks by working together. And we also need to give more power to women, with all my respect to men. For resilience for the future, women are a very, very important ingredient.
Thank you very much, Managing Director, for your perspective on Morocco. Christine Lagarde, let me turn again to you. We know that every word that is pronounced by the President of ECB is with intense scrutiny, so I'll try to shape it very broadly about the Mediterranean. And I read your recent comments about the huge environmental challenges that we have in the south of the Mediterranean. But given what's happening right now in the Mediterranean, and the fact that maybe this sea that used to reunite us will become once again an ocean of division, how can we reshape, reinvent, re-embrace a peaceful and a productive and fruitful relationship between Africa and Europe in order to build more prosperity and to tackle all of the challenges that are underlying, such as migration, economic migration, but also climate change migration? How can we have the tough and frank conversations between Africa and Europe with regards to the next economic model that would work in the region?
That's a little loose question, huh? I think everybody around this panel and everybody would agree that the best economic response to the issues that we're facing is peace. It's peace everywhere there is war, everywhere there is conflict. And peace is vastly desired and expected from many corners of the world where violence is at play. And that's, I'm not making a philosophical statement or a political statement. It's a true fact that economic recovery can be, which takes forever, and the IMF knows that, Kristalina knows that inside out, can be destroyed in a matter of a week because of war, because of conflict, anywhere. So that's point number one. But point number two, if we focus on, let's focus on the Mediterranean, which is, as you say, a sea that brings us together, but can also be, as the Pope said recently, a cemetery for those who are aspiring to a better life and can't find the other side. If you look at it at the moment, if you look between the south and the north of the Med, you have per capita GDP, which is double that of the south in the north. You have water scarcity and water catastrophic shortfall, which put about 250 million people at risk in the next decade. Those are just, two of the economic issues that I wanted to flag. And then in the face of that, you will hear in the next few days a lot about fragmentation, about the geopolitical divide, about what actually separates us and creates more divisions. But at the same time, if you look at the upside, in this region, south of the Med, the intra-regional trade is only 5%. It's probably one of the less integrated economic regions in the world. So the upside, the opportunities, the potential, if people put their mind to it, if there is money to be made, let's face it, is immense. So the partnership that there could be between the north and the south of the Med could be extraordinary. One, there are various ingredients that will be needed. Let me just finish two things. Number one, you need infrastructure, and that applies throughout Africa, but it's certainly the case. Good example, by the way, of that Morocco is demonstrating. If you invest massively in infrastructure over the course of time, it changes your economic situation and the output. The kingdom has invested almost more than 30% of GDP over the last 2 decades just in infrastructure. And as Kristalina was saying, the resources in renewable energies in this part of the world, you talk solar, wind, hydrogen. Tidjam will be much better than me to talk about solar. That's his life and his business now. It's enormous. What is lacking on the other side? Renewable energies at that scale and at that level. So the partnerships that will result from the fragmentation, you talk about friendshoring, reshoring, shoring altogether. This should happen in this part of the world where the partnership that exists within Europe, for instance, which we have experienced over the last many decades, should be extended beyond and should reach out the other side of the Med. Yes.
Let me just understand something. There were attempts to build regional integration in the region. But isn't it wishful thinking when you have countries that don't talk to each other, that don't work together?
Look, when on September 9th, when a neighbor of Morocco, Algeria, I'm sorry, I'm going to be politically incorrect here, but when Algeria reached out and said, our brothers from Morocco need help, we're here. And the same happened on the other side. When Algeria was going through all these fires, Morocco reached out and extended a hand to the other side. Those moments are precious. They need to be leveraged. They need to be expanded. And I think it's our business, us in economics, in finance, to actually identify the upside and say, when you reached out, when you opened your hand to the other side, it was legitimate and it was a humanitarian demonstration. More needs to happen. And there can be some economic upside as a result. And I hope I'm not preaching in the desert.
Thank God we don't have politicians in this panel. We only have technicians of the economy. So I think we'll let them do the heavy lifting on all of these issues. Thank you very much.
But our job is to show them that there is huge economic upside to political resolution of the issues.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Mr. Michael, let me turn to you because... And I'll just give a heads up and a little bit of house management to my speakers. We only have 21 minutes left, as you can see on the counter, so I will ask all of you to be a little bit briefer for the next question so we can ensure that we can all be on time and that the very important people here in this panel can attend to the other stuff they have to do right after. Michael, we've seen a great list of what we need to do. Finance the ecological transition, finance education, social protection. You're the expert in finance. In the words of the great American poet Tom Cruise, show me the money. Where is the money to do all of that? How can we do all of that, Michael? You're the one who can give us the answer to these kind of questions.
I thought you rebranded me as theoretician of economic cycles, etc. So you want me to be back in my...
I want you to be both in the continent of thinkers and the continent of doers, and I know you can do both. So, take us afloat with this.
I will try. And I will try by being a banker and by taking a very specific case example and try to put some figures. Apologies, but he wants me to be a banker, so I will be a banker. Let's take green ammonia and hydrogen production. I'll give you a few very simple figures. The total announced production volume as of January of this year in the world is about 38 million tons. That was multiplied by 6 over the last 2 years. These are announced volumes. It will take $320 billion to finance this. And the question is, where's the money going to come from? I'm going to start by saying it's not all going to happen. This includes some 795 projects, of which only about 10% have passed the planning stage, are in the committed stage. On a worldwide basis, we've looked at some research published on the subject. So, when setting policy goals, or indeed trying to draw big lessons for the planet, I think we should always remember that at the end of the day, market will drive what happens and what doesn't happen. And that means that if pricing or pricing expectations do not meet the requirements of investors and fund providers, etc., it won't happen. It's that simple. So that's the first point. And by the way, if I can, and I'm going to take an extra minute because I want to talk about Morocco.
Absolutely.
And I want to talk about Morocco.
I just forget this in my question, but you were a member of the Royal Commission in charge of shaping the future, the Commission for the new development model. And this is, of course, one of the reasons we wanted to have your perspective on how can Morocco address these challenges.
Indeed. I had the great honor to participate in the work of that commission. And let me jump straight to some of our findings. The first thing, there are 3 things I want people to remember about Morocco when it comes to green energy going forward. First, the unique scale of our country for natural resources of the future. Solar, wind, ocean, 3,500 kilometers of coastlines. Fertilizers, 80% of the world reserves. First point. Second point, the connectivity with Europe and the Atlantic Basin for gas, electricity, carbon markets. This connectivity is unique. Third, and finally, the current and future infrastructure, pipes, desalinization, ports, which will enable us to leapfrog to hydrogen ready. And this is very, very critical altogether. Closing the parenthesis on, not a parenthesis, the major point I wanted to make about Morocco. Let's go to where the money is going to come from. I will not dare, in front of the IMF and the World Bank, to discuss public sources of funding. Let me just focus, and people don't expect me to do that, so let me just focus on private capital. Private capital, which we can define broadly as being neither public, such as state budgets, etc., or public in the sense of listed instruments on the public market, such as stocks, bonds, etc., has been increasing in a massive way over the last few decades. It now represents twice what it did about 20 years ago, I think, and it is about 15% of the total capital available. Soon, it will be 1/5 of the total. If you think about it, 20% of the world capital available is in private capital hands. Some examples, some numbers. You wanted, you're going to get it. Private equity, estimated capital available is $2.5 trillion worldwide. You know what that could buy? That could buy the GDP of Russia and South Africa combined. US university endowments, let's take this example. The top 5 universities in America have $200 billion in endowment, which is absolutely spectacular. What could that buy? All the IPOs for last year and for this year to date. The combined net worth, I've sadly looked at the list of Forbes 400 billionaires. The combined net worth of those people is $4.5 trillion. You know what that could buy? It could buy Apple and Google together without a control. Or, much better, 10% of this could fund all of the hydrogen projects we discussed. All 800 of them could be funded by only allocating 10% of this private-held capital.
So what you're saying is that the problem is not finding money, but it's how to move money.
It's channeling, it's exactly right.
It's the channeling of money.
It is channeling these enormous amounts and pools of capital. I just want to add one because it's also, again, relevant to our country.
Sure.
Sovereign funds. Take the 20 largest sovereign funds in the world. They have over $10 trillion in assets. Of course, those get invested in public securities, etc. But they fund infrastructure. And here in Morocco, we have Fund Mohammed VI, which is getting ready to deploy its very sizable capital for projects which are going to be relevant and important for the future economic well-being of this country.
Michael, I cannot thank you enough for making the life of hundreds of consultants watching the show. I'm sure they're taking notes, and they're going to use your numbers in future presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, you will find them in some stuff. These are amazing and shimmering numbers. Tidjane Thiam, let me turn to you and maybe go down a few trillions to come back to your personal history with, you have a very, very special bond with Morocco. Your late father was buried in Morocco. You spent part of your youth and hopefully some of your very nice years as a teenager in Rabat, so you have a very special connection. And you went to the helm of finance and on C-suite, executive suites, and you've seen the world from these perspectives where the carpets are very thin and danger is everywhere. How do you see us, Moroccans? How do you see the journey of Morocco in this new world economic order and how we're doing?
Well, thank you. Thank you, Abdelmalek. And as they say in London, I would have to declare an interest because I'm hopelessly conflicted on the issue. I love this country for all the reasons you mentioned, and I also love it for philosophical reasons. When people ask me to talk about Morocco abroad, I mention a few things. The first one is always that this was the western border of the Ottoman Empire. That helps people, I love history, that helps people understand the strength of this country, the courage of its citizens. It's not all the students of history know that it's not for lack of effort that the Turks were not able to occupy Morocco. There was a bay in Algiers, there was a bay in Tunis, never in Rabat or Fez or Meknes. So this fierce desire to remain independent, for me, is core to the identity of Morocco, not to mention the adventure in Europe and in Spain and the centuries spent there and what, those who came back, brought back when they left Spain, and not to mention I think King Hassan used to compare Morocco to a tree which lives in Europe and the roots in Africa, not to mention the connection to sub-Saharan Africa, which is deep and real. And sorry, I'm going to be optimistic again, but I'm a great believer in cultural exchanges and cultural diversity. And for me, the fact that Morocco is so successful is a message of hope. That if you mix a little bit of Africa with a little bit of Europe, with a little bit of the Arab world, and a tolerant religious approach, you get something that's pretty damn good. So that's my pitch for Morocco.
Thank you very much, Tidjane, for this amazing testimony about how you see Morocco doing. Ladies and gentlemen, we had prepared a set of questions that would take maybe the rest of the day to answer to. So we will change it for the end of this session because we only have 12 minutes left. I'm sure all of you want to have a key takeaway from these amazing leaders because we spoke about how we can face systemic shocks, how do we deal with pressure, but let's take it to the personal level. how do you guys deal with pressure when there is this pressure immense that is mounting, that is coming? Do you listen to music? Do you do sports? Tidjane, I know you play none less than 6 sports: judo, taekwondo, football, basketball. So I'll start with you. We'll do it reverse, in the reverse order, so the managing director can have the last word if you would like. So how do you cope with, maybe a subsidiary question for you, Tidjane, before that. In 2025, there is an important election. Are you running to become president of the Olympics Committee? No, of the International Olympics Committee, because there is a rumor about that.
Well, all I can say is that I will attend the next session of the International Olympic Committee in Mumbai next week.
So how do you deal with stress?
You almost gave me a heart attack, but thank you for the question you asked. I got worried for a second. No, how do I deal with stress? First of all, sports, it's a passion. I love it. I was never very good at it, and that's why I'm working a bit funny, but I've managed to blow about every joint in my body playing all the sports. But, okay. I believe, and I'm willing to be challenged on this, that football, soccer for Americans, is the single most meritocratic activity on the planet.
Okay. That's fair. Michael, let me turn to you. Yeah.
So that's why I love it. Okay? Because a child can be in Marrakesh or in Abidjan and say, I want to play for Man U. If he's good enough or she's good enough, she will. This is, for me, it's the best expression of letting talent loose and letting people compete. And what I like in sport is the meritocratic aspect of it. And also, if you're not very skilled, like me, hard work pays. You know, if you're not very good at basketball, if you're willing to sink 500 shots a day, you're going to become good. And a lot of sports are like that. They reward effort, they reward discipline, they reward resilience. And I have a professor who really kind of changed my life when I was taking exams. He said, you know, most people focus on getting good grades. What determines your potential is not your best grade, it's your worst grade. So you have to strive to elevate your minimum. It's a sentence that stayed with me. So in sports, you play basketball, you can lose a game in 30 seconds. 10 points, boom, game lost. So really, this vigilance and being aware that it's when you're under pressure that you make huge mistakes is very important, because that's also a basis for resilience, vigilance, and all those lessons you learn through sport, plus teamwork, etc. But I don't want to monopolize the time. But I think it's a great thing, and I encourage my children to practice sport. I encourage everybody to practice sport. It's a school of humility, because you learn to lose. And that's a great quality in life, being able to deal with defeat and going to the next game and playing again to the best of your own.
So you have to live up to your potential. Let me turn to you, Michael, because I think recently you experimented something that is maybe out of your comfort zone in order to address those stuff. So I think you conducted an orchestra, right? After 15 months of training. Can you tell us a little bit about this experience when you've been a star of the M&A? Is it something to cope with pressure, or is it out of passion?
Okay, you're determined to embarrass me today. I'll remember that. This was an experience which has nothing to do with stress or managing stress. I will come back to that. But since you asked, I've always been passionate about classical music, and when I was a young man, I wanted to become an orchestra conductor, and I wrote to the Conservatoire de Paris right before I had the baccalaureate. I think I was 15, 16 years old. They told me, you're too old. So that was a big disappointment with which I started my career on Wall Street. But I never gave up. So many, many years later, someone picked up in some interview that I would have loved to be an orchestra conductor, and gave me, and the Royal Festival Hall in London gave me this opportunity. So I managed to learn music for a period of 15 months, doing nothing else or hardly anything else, which was not fun for my business, but so be it. And learning a whole new world, because the musicians are just a magnificent part of the human species. And when you spend 20, 30 years on Wall Street dealing with, how do I put this, ruthless people, And suddenly you find yourself immersed in a group of highly sensitive musicians who understand your eyes, your gestures, your breathing. It's a very, very different experience altogether. And I enjoyed it, and I performed the concert, and it remains one of the most beautiful experiences in my life. So how do I relieve stress? I want to refer to Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs gave a great speech, which I encourage all of you who have not read it, to the Stanford University students, I think in the late 90s. And he concluded the speech by saying 4 words: stay hungry, stay foolish. And that's what I do.
I think we'll take it from Steve Jobs. President Lagarde, you're almost an advertising for German watchmaker Tag Heuer, don't crack under pressure. But really, when the situations become tough, what do you do to distress and to find a little bit of this inner peace, to restart the engine and be able to cope with these very difficult times?
I do something that I want to share with anybody who cares to listen and who is also sometimes facing a moment of stress and there's little bugs in your stomach that tell you that you're about to do something that you don't really like. And I used to be a swimmer. Serious swimmer, and I was on the national synchronized swimming team in my country. And as those of you who watch synchronized swimming know, you have to be underwater quite a lot. So what I do in times of high stress, I do something that is called apnea. And you can all do it. It doesn't require any skill. But it's a way to control your breathing, to hold it, to feel your body responding to the stress that you inflict upon it. And just the process of apneaing and doing it right, and it's super simple. There's lots of tutoring and ways to learn how to do it. I can assure you that all these bugs in your tummy that were being messy and were creating stress for you, and all this level of energy that you were concentrating, is just going to be relax. And you know, I'm not bragging about it, and it's dead simple. Try it. You don't have to go into high-level meditation. It's a very simple physical exercise. The other thing that I kept away from my synchronized swimming days is what my coach used to tell us. Yeah. And she used to say, grit your teeth and smile and get on with it. And that is something that, you know, if you know synchronized swimming, when you have a nose clip, when you are just getting a really bad grade from the judge, and you have your coach that says, grit your teeth and smile at the same time, it's a bit difficult.
Minister فتاح, how do you smile underwater? How do you relieve your stress?
I was going to tell that I'm often underwater like Mrs. Lagarde, but it's definitely not artistic and synchronized. Really, to cope with the stress, I think I have one simple rule, is whenever I have a weekend, I'm back to normal life. Normal life is family, real people. So as a consequence, I have a very interesting collection of selfies in the pasta shelves in my supermarkets. And the other bad news for my family is they have to pretend to like what I've been prepared for the Sunday lunch. But except for this, I think it's important in this position to live simply with the real people, because it's our duty as in this position to serve their interest, and it's our mission.
Thank you very much, Minister فتاح. Managing Director, as our host here in Morocco, what do you do to relieve, when you have, you know, those guys from your staff coming to your office running, and they're like, oh, Managing Director, the world is about to end. We don't have any money in this country, and the finance minister is at the door with his ambassador. How do you cope with this kind of stress?
Well, first, I am an optimist, and I look at every problem, as dramatic it may be, as an opportunity to do something that has never been done before. This is how we did the Resilience and Sustainability Trust, getting a dormant asset. The finance people here love it. A dormant asset, wake it up, make it work for countries. Second, I bring energy up, whether it is song or dance or talking to my grandchildren who I so much love. And finally, I have a magic song that gears me up. I put the volume high.
I hope the people in the back are scrolling right now and waiting for the name of this song, because maybe we'll hear it.
I put volume as high as my ears would tolerate. So get ready for it. We will rock you.
Thank you very much, Madam Director. Please rise up for the photo. Can you please rise up for the audience and applaud them? Please stay 1 second for the group photo. That will be at the end. And thank you very much to everybody for this amazing session.